All right, here we have Parshas Lech Lecha. Now again, the Torah is God's will, God's wisdom, and God is creating us, me and you. And the Torah is the only instruction book for how to live your life, written directly by the Creator. There are imposters, there are pretenders, there are forgeries, there are, I want to call it, the similes, but the only religion that even claims that God, the creator of the universe, gave to the entire nation. At that time on Mount Sinai, there was at least 3 million people standing there. That all of them saw and they all heard, face to face, it says, panim b'panim, God give them the Torah. The only religion that even claims is Judaism. There's no, even those religions that claim to replace Judaism, they don't make up such a story like that. Right? They believe the Torah is true. They don't make up a story. They just say, the Jews lost the Bible. They don't know how to interpret it properly or something like that. But so good. So you make up your own Bible. Say that God took out your people of your religion out into the desert or to some, to Rome or somewhere, and he spoke to them, he told them. No, nobody else makes up a story. Why? Because people, the other religions, they don't want a God that talks to everybody. They want a God that's really like high up, pristine, and he only talks like through one person or something like that. But not so in Judaism. God, the creator of the universe, chose the Jewish people, took them out of Egypt. That's what it says in the Bible. And you can take it or leave it. Took the Jewish people out of Egypt, gave them the Torah, and the Jews have been believing this stubbornly for the last 3,300 years, since he took them out of Egypt. They took them out of Egypt and gave them the Torah. Now, the whole Torah that he gave also contains these stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is God writing this. God is writing this. And how it's written in the third person, God spoke to, right? God spoke, it's written as though somebody else is writing it about what God did. Okay, that's a question. The Ramban talks about this, answers it. It's an essence of God that's writing the Torah, higher level. Okay, but now what we're learning over here is not just Judaism. We're learning truth. We're learning the creator of the universe that's creating you. It's creating all the people who worship all these other weird religions and those people who claim to replace Judaism. God is creating them also. And this is their instruction book. And Mashiach will bring it that all of the world, the Rambam brings, that they'll drop all the religions and they'll worship only the God that took the Jews out of Egypt and gave them the Torah. And they'll observe the Torah, 7 Noahide commandments, which one of the main one is not to worship idols, not to worship anything except for the Creator. You can't worship the Son of the Creator, the ghost of the Creator, the star of the Creator, the spirit of the Creator. You can't worship any of these things. You only worship the Creator. Parshas Lech Lecha, and that's the Torah. Anything that brings you closer to the Torah, attach yourself to. Anything that doesn't will be detached. That's why all the nations will leave their religions. Abraham was the first person to realize this. Abraham went around and he broke idols. Abraham went around and he broke idols. He broke the idols. What are idols? Idols work. Idolatry works. Not 100%, but it works. If it didn't work, nobody would do it. A person makes a statue of a frog or something, prays to it, says, all I want is a new Ferrari. And he gets it. He gets it for us. And the thing works. It's fantastic. So everybody starts worshiping the frog until it doesn't work. Until somebody comes along and says, what are you worshiping a frog for? Worship a monkey. A Ferrari? I got a Bugatti through a monkey. Worship a monkey. Okay, we'll try it. Well, works. You get a monkey. That's idolatry. And Abraham went around and he smashed all the idols, because what's the thing of idolatry? Selfishness. Selfishness. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it to save yourself, to bless yourself, to get yourself, to raise yourself, to hope yourself, right? You want to be enlightened, you want to be enbrightened, you want to be right? Whatever you want. I'm going to get it. I'm going to receive it. I'm going to go to heaven. Nobody else is going to go to heaven. I'm going to conquer. Everybody else is going to be my servant. Everybody this. That's all the religions in the world. Came along Abraham, and Abraham broke the idols. Stop thinking about yourself. Think about only the Creator. And everybody said, who is this guy? Where did he come? Who let him in? Who let this guy in the door? How did he get in here? What did he get out of here? Leave us alone. And Abraham smashed the idols. That's what it says. Believe only in the Creator. Okay. So now we're going to talk about Abraham. Now, Abraham came about 450 years something before the Torah was given. Before the Torah was given. The main thing of Judaism is the Torah. The main thing is the Torah. Abraham was just like a preparation for the Torah. And the Torah is, in a way, a preparation. That's the handbook, how to bring the future redemption, the Geula. Now, there's a big difference. Abraham was promised by God much more than the Jews got when they went into Egypt, when they left Egypt. When the Jews left Egypt, they wandered around the desert for 40 years. And then afterwards, they went and they conquered the land of Israel. Joshua went and he conquered the land of Israel. Joshua. He conquered the land of Israel, but he only conquered the land of 7 nations. He did not conquer 3 nations, the Keni and the Kenizi and the Kadmoni. He didn't get those 3 lands. And we're going to conquer those lands. That's what Mashiach is going to do. So God promised Abraham 7 nations, the land of 7 nations. I'm sorry, take it back. God promised Abraham the land of 10 nations, and they only got 7. Now, this is going to be, and this is also Kabbalistic because there are what's called 10 sefirot. In the Kabbalistic books, and they explain God's personality, how God interacts with the world. And they say that God has 10 facets of his personality. And amazingly, so do people. That's what it means that man is made in God's image. We learned just last week why it's forbidden to kill people, because people are made in God's image. These are beautiful pictures here by Baruch Nachshon, who just passed away. No? Just passed away, what is it? 2 weeks ago. Baruch Nachshon lived in Hebron. Sichos Sarah Shabbos Parshas Lech Lecha Yud Aleph Mar Cheshvan Tavshin Nun Beis. Parshas Lech Lecha, this Torah portion of Lech Lecha is a Parsha Klalis, is a general. The Parsha Zu in this Matchilin Tkufaso Shel Avram Avinu. We begin the period of Abraham. Abraham was born like almost 2,000 years after the world was created. Yehudi Rishon, the first Jew. Hechel mi'atzivu Rishon, beginning with the first commandment of God to Abraham. Vayomer Hashem el Avram lech lecha. God spoke to Avram, lech lecha, go. Lech lecha, you go, me'artzecha, from your land, me'moladtecha, from your birthplace, u'mebeis avicha, and from the house of your father, el eretz asher arecha, to the land that I will show you. U'me'achar mikan, and afterwards, hemshech haparsha al derech halichaso, and afterwards, in the continuation of this week's Torah portion, it talks about how Abraham went, v'nisiyaso, and traveled. The Eretz Yisrael went to the land of Israel. Haftachato, the promise of God, Latet LaAvram, to give to Abraham and his children the land of Israel. Ulazaracha etain es ha'oretz hazos, to your offspring I will give this land. L'cha etnanu l'zaracha ad olam, I will give it to you. God promised him, I will give it to you and to your offspring forever. Ubrit bein abatarim, and this week's Torah portion talks about the covenant, the agreement that God made with Abraham, the brit that God made with Abraham between the pieces. He told him to take these animals and cut them into 2, put on one side, on the other side, and God, so to speak, and Abraham passed between the 2 of them. It says the Shekhinah. Vayomu kurat Hashem et Avram brit And that day, God made with Abraham a covenant, Lemor to say, L'zaracha natati et ha'oretz, to your seed I will give you this land. That was the covenant between the pieces, to give Abraham the land of Israel. And then Asiyam Porsha, at the end of this week's Torah portion, that's in the sort of, not in the beginning, but after the middle is this thing. But at the very end, Medubar as a tzibur, it talks about the commandment of God to make the milah, the circumcision, the kiyum mitzvah, and doing this commandment by means of Abraham. Asher be'emtzuto, that through this circumcision, nichretet brit, there is made a covenant, an eternal agreement between the Jewish people, Yisrael, and God. Zot biti, this is the covenant, beini u'beinechem, between me and all of you, bein zaracha acharecha, and all of your children after you. And surprisingly, when Jews leave Judaism, usually the last commandment that they abandon is circumcision. There were Jews, especially there was places like Bulgaria, where the Jews don't know anything about Judaism, but they know that a Jew has to circumcise his children. Circumcise your children when you're 8 days old. That when the child is 8 days old, that they know. And because of that, there was a minimum of intermarriage, because they know a Jew is different. A Jew is different, especially in the organ of procreation. There, a Jew is different. That's where the Brit is found. Briti b'v'sarchem, the Brit Olam, I put a covenant in your flesh for an eternal covenant. Mikivan since these things in the Parshas Lech Lecha Mi'artzecha Haftachas, because all these things are in this Torah portion called Lech Lecha Haftachat HaKodesh Baruch Hu, the promise of Abraham on the land of Israel, and the commandment of Brit Milah. Hey, Minyanim, these are the first things in the Torah, in the service of Abraham, the first Jew, Asher Mimenu, that from it, this is the source of the Jewish people, Kulo, the land of Israel, and the circumcision. Are moving, so it's understood. She'em mevateim et tochan haklali, that they express the general definition of what is the Torah and Judaism. Somehow or other, this Abraham was given these two things, and this the land of Israel and the circumcision. That was the two covenants that God made, promises that God made with Abraham, unchanging, indelible, eternal commandments, connections that the Jewish people, every Jew, has with God, whether he wants to or doesn't want to, whether he lives in Israel, doesn't live in it, whether he's circumcised or not circumcised. Right? There's Jews, who knows how many, millions in Russia, that communism succeeded in wiping out Judaism, and they didn't circumcise their children. 2 generations, 3 generations, uncircumcised. And they certainly didn't live in the land of Israel. But as soon as you tell them that they're Jews, and what a Jew is, something wakes up, and a lot of them want to be circumcised, and a lot of, unfortunately, when they come to the land of Israel, they're very disappointed because it's not in the same spirit as what God gave to Abraham, but that'll all change. Yadua, it is known. She'im Avram Avinu Achilat Kufa Shel Shnei Alfei Torah. It's known that when Abraham was born, began the what's it called? Eon, the age of Torah. It says that this world is 6,000 years. 2,000 years of confusion, 2,000 years of Torah, 2,000 years of Mashiach. That's what it says. Up to Abraham was confusion. Then from Abraham was Torah. Now the Torah was given, like I said, 400 or 500 years after Abraham. But nevertheless, he opened up the door to this whole idea of the Torah. Abraham began the preparation for giving of the Torah. Even more. He began He began the uniqueness of the giving of the Torah, not just the preparation for the Torah, but to a certain degree, he began the connection that was achieved through the giving of Torah. Okay, what is it? The Jewish people are pretty weird. What's going on? The Jewish people, they were all slaves, and all of in Egypt, and they all got out. They didn't all get out, but the ones that are alive now are from those who got out. There weren't like a few Jews that hid up in the mountains or something, and they didn't go into. All the Jews were in Egypt. And every Jew that you see today, unless he's a convert or a parent or child of converts, but he's a direct descendant from those Jews who left Egypt. And they left Egypt in order to receive the Torah, in order to go to the land of Israel. So this whole idea of the circumcision and the land of Israel, this somehow or other, this is the big, not just a preparation for the giving of the Torah, but this is also a bit of the connection that occurred when God gave the Torah to the Jews. Now that's pretty weird. I mean, the Jews got the Torah, God himself took them out of Egypt, gave them the Torah, and we see amazingly that 40 days after they got the Torah, they worshiped the golden calf. Not all of them, but either passively or actively. They worshiped the golden calf. So we see that Abraham is something over here, something going on with Abraham in this covenant that's deep, very, very deep, that if you don't get it, then the Torah becomes, how do you say, weak. It's possible to worship idols, to change a religion to this, to leave the Torah. So let's see what is exactly the ingredient that Abraham gave. What's going on over here? These covenants of the land of Israel and circumcision. Why that's so essential to the world, to life, to Judaism, to all mankind, the Torah. And especially Abraham, and especially Abraham began this with his commandment, Lech lecha me'artzecha. This all began in this week's Torah portion, when God said to Abraham, leave your land and your birthplace and the place of your fathers, and go to the land that I will show you. That's all included in the name of this portion. This week's Torah portion, Lech lecha, go from your land. That's like the title over this whole entire business that we're talking about. Shalochi, and therefore, Gam lo mesupar b'Torah. It's not told in the Torah, except a little bit. Odos ma'asav shel Avram Avinu b'terem bo l'Eretz Israel. It's not spoken. Doesn't tell you very much about what happened to Abraham before he came to the land of Israel. Just little tiny details. Ikar sipur ma'asav. The main thing begins when Lech lecha me'artzecha, when God tells Abraham, go from where you are. He was in Ur Kasdim, wherever he was. Go from where you are. Go from where you are and go to Eretz Israel. Then Abraham was 75 years old. Now, before that, there were other things that Abraham did. It says he was thrown into a fiery furnace, and he broke the idols of his father. But this was only mentioned in short ways. The main story of Abraham starts when God tells him to go to Israel. And that's this week's Torah portion, Lech lecha. We have to understand, calling in the Torah, everything that's in the Torah, Milashon Hora, is an eternal teaching for all time and all place in the service of the Jewish people. Maya Hora. So what is the teaching in this for our Jewish people serving God? Shalachar Matan Torah, that we're now after the Torah is given from Lech lecha me'artzecha. What can we learn from this? I mean, God already gave us the Torah. Okay, Abraham prepared it, but we got it. So what? Iruach chad pa'ami asher hava hachana lamatan Torah. Right? It's like the cavemen developed the wheel. There was no such thing as cavemen, but let's say the cavemen. So every time, you go and buy a car, you have to learn about the cavemen It's very important to know the. What do you care about? You have a car. The same thing. We have Abraham prepared the way for the Torah. And what do we care about? What we have the Torah now? Okay, what do we care about all these preparations? Okay, make a little mention that Abraham prepared. No, we have a whole entire stories about Abraham, what he did, and Lech Lecha. But what do we care? What there was. So Abraham was the beginner. He started out very nice. We'll remember him. This is Kadei Leidas, because we should know. Shavodas Avram, the service of Abraham, Lech Lecha. This is a preparation and a giving of power for the service that came after Matan Torah. It's not sufficient. I'm sorry. This is Avoda Sha'achar Matan Torah. Einu maspik mishum she'en zu hara. We have to know that the service of Avram Avinu is a preparation and a giving of power to the service of after Matan Torah. It's is something very necessary. I have to look what this means. But Paul, it's he separated the lines. He separated. Look, I say, "Eino maspik mishum she'en zehora b'poel ba'avodas b'nei Yisrael la'achrei Matan Torah." It's a preparation. It's not this service of Avram that we have to do is a preparation for us, but it's not sufficient for what we do now after Matan Torah. We have to do something a little bit more, even more. B'kol shana, every year, k'shekurim b'parshas Torah, when we read the parsha of the Torah, yesh lechios, we have to live with it brand new. So 1 second, I don't understand. Abraham was the preparation of the giving of the Torah. So we read the Torah, and so that's it. We prepared and we got the Torah. What do we have to read Abraham again for? The Kol Shan every year, every when we read this in the Torah, Yesh Chayuz, we have to live with it brand new. How much more so every day it has to be brand new. How much more so in the special time when we read this parsha, when we read the whole parsha of the Torah, Lech Lecha, and we read it publicly, and we make a blessing before and after each reading, since that then it returns on itself everything we said in the Torah portion, and especially those things that happen the first time, even more, beyoter say to beyoter oz. So if according to this, so it comes out that the Shabbos parsha is Lech Lecha every year. It's returning on itself this whole thing of Lech Lecha as a preparation and a beginning for the giving of the Torah. But we already prepared and we already got the Torah. So it must be that there's a very important lesson over here that must be something is added on. It's not sufficient just what we read last year. It has to be added on for something more than all the years before. If so, we have to understand Dorish Biur, this has to be explained. Amma, what could it possibly be? And what could it possibly be in the preparation for Matan Torah to us now? Then we are already after the given. When was the Torah given? 3,000 years ago. 3,300 below rock, not only after the preparation of Matan Torah, but also after the completion of Matan Torah. 1 second, we have to keep preparing all the time. Doesn't make any sense. Right? It's like somebody keeps going every year. He goes and he buys a new tuxedo to get married, but he already got married. He already made the preparations. And he orders a big hall, and he gets a band, and he gets prepared for the wedding. Hey, you already got married. You got married 50 years ago. The Jewish people got the Torah 3,000 years ago. What are we preparing for? Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha is only a preparation. We have to every year prepare. Says the Rebbe, yes, we're going to see what it is. Yisirim is even more. The Inyan of Matan Torah is every day. Like we say when we bless on the Torah every morning, notain the Torah, that God gives the Torah. Just like God creates us all the time, so God is always giving us the Torah. Like the rabbis say, B'kol yom yeh b'neicha kechadashim. Even every day it has to be like new, and even more, it has to be brand new. The Torah is brand new every day. And that makes life exciting because it's true though. Al pi atzivo, according to what we said before, the Mailim B'Kodesh, that we have to go up in holiness, move on its understood Shabbat Yom every day. You have to make something new, Nailit Yoter, higher than what it was before. If so, Binyan Shel Matan Torah, after all the elevations that we've been reading in the Torah, right? The Jewish people have a custom that since the Torah was given, they read the Torah in public. And we've been doing this since the Torah was given. 3,300 years, they read the Torah in public. That's why it's ridiculous, all these people that say the Jews lost the Torah, changed, or whatever. They've been reading it nonstop 3,000 years. If there's a little change or mistakes, everybody notices it. But if so, we've been reading Lech Lecha as a preparation for giving the Torah, the story about Abraham, which is a preparation for giving the Torah. We've been reading it 3,300 years in public, right? And even more, the Torah is being given every day, brand new. So what do we have to keep preparing for? What is there to prepare? Modern Torah, the giving of the Torah every day, after all these elevations, and especially the giving of the Torah every day, in addition to the fact, in a special way, every year, like we said before, that we read the Torah, and we read Parshat Yitro, which talks about the giving of the Torah, and Parshat Etchanan, where it repeats again. This is in the book of Deuteronomy. It repeats again the giving of the Torah. How much more so in the holiday of Shavuot, when we remember the giving of the Torah. Every year, there has to be something higher and higher and higher. So many years, so many days, so many generations. So if so, how can we say that we always have to prepare for this every year as a preparation for the giving of the Torah? We receive the Torah. We talk about it all the time. We have a holiday that celebrates. Lo nitan le'amor, we can't say that the service of Lech Lecha, this preparation that we have to make as a preparation for Matan Torah, is only for those people, that maybe those people who are newcomers, or they didn't take it seriously the previous years. Because we can't say that, because the revelations of the 10 commandments in Matan Torah, when the Torah was given the first time, and so it is every single year, it doesn't depend on how much service the Jewish people did. The Matan, when God gave the Torah, He gave it to everyone, the greatest, highest people, and so it is every year. Hagilui Matan Torah, the revelation of the giving of the Torah on its own, affected the whole entire world, so that even the birds didn't chirp and fly in the air. How much more so every single Jew? Until I'll call Dibur B'Dibur Parcha Nishmasim, it says that every word that was spoken in Mount Sinai, at least in the first 2 commandments, and the Jews said we can't take it anymore, it says the souls jumped out of their bodies. So if so, this shows that the Jews reached the highest level of service possible. And nevertheless, every year you have to have a preparation for Lech Lecha. You have to have this preparation of enough one-time preparation for receiving the Torah. We already received the Torah, and we receive the Torah every year, and we receive the Torah every day. What do we have to have a preparation every year? What can that possibly add to us? We'll find out, God willing, tomorrow. Now let's do a Yom Yom. It's moving very slowly. I don't understand why. Let's try it again. There it is. Torah study every day is crucial to life, not just to Judaism or to your spirit, to life itself. The world is created through the Torah. This applies not only to the soul of the person who's studying it, but also of his family. Because through Torah study, the atmosphere of the house becomes an atmosphere of Torah and piety, godliness. Have a good day with Mashiach. Now, God willing, 3:00, we learn Chumash. with commentary. Hope to see you then.